Until the early decades of the 20th century, the territory of Saudi Arabia was crap for development. The Arabian Peninsula is among the world's least habitable areas. Temperatures regularly breach 110 degrees Fahrenheit, even in what passes as winter. The peninsula's interior is almost entirely rock and sand. Historically, the vast bulk of the region's population has clustered near the mountains along the peninsula's southeastern and western flanks, where elevation rings a few drops out of the sky. These less arid subregions are bereft of trees, generating a weird dissonance. The nearly contained nature of the Persian Gulf makes it a sailor's delight, but the lack of trees anywhere on the peninsula grants the locals zero capacity for developing naval cultures. Any outsiders who can reach the Gulf can dictate most terms to most of the locals. Modern Saudi Arabia is even worse, because it didn't even get the Arabian Peninsula's best land. The greenest lands in the region, on the peninsula's southern flanks, were chunked together into Oman, an entity with centuries of expertise as a tradeway station, and Yemen, an entity with centuries of expertise as a failed state. Most of the Persian Gulf ports were carved out first for the British Empire and then granted to local loyalist tribes in the 1970s, becoming the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, and Kuwait. The only non-useless bit of land that eventually made it into the modern Saudi kingdom is the thin western mountain fringe of the Hejaz, where a handful of oases serve as the region's historical hub and home to the holy cities of Islam, Mecca and Medina. The world knows well the state that commands those cities, the wildly wealthy, wildly violent, oil-drenched kingdom of Saudi Arabia. But before there was oil, before there was Saudi Arabia, there was only desert. Until a little over a century ago, the royal family in Arabia wasn't the House of Saud, but instead the Hashemites, an Arab clan that could trace its lineage back to the family of the Prophet Muhammad himself. The Hashemites controlled the most culturally and economically significant territory the Arabian Peninsula had to offer the Hejaz on the peninsula's Red Sea coast, home to most of Arabia's cities, infrastructure, agricultural capacity, and trading opportunities. The Hashemites of the time were a colorful, cosmopolitan people. The Hejaz wasn't simply a trading zone, it was also a tourism center. Yes, the Muslim holy cities of Mecca and Medina were the end destination for pilgrimages, but with all the towing and froing, the cities were also well known as good locations to swap goods, ideas, and body fluids. It was as if Jerusalem somehow merged with Las Vegas. The Hashemites' allies, come sponsors, come rulers, were the Ottoman Turks. From the mid-18th century, the northeastern and western coasts of the Arabian Peninsula, the most of the useful bits, were the southernmost extremities of an ailing Ottoman Empire. In exchange for a cut of the Hejaz, profits and pledges of Hashemite loyalty, the Ottomans tended to let the locals run things, providing only enough of an imperial presence to maintain security. None of this sat well with a local pair of tribes. The Saudis were sand poor, consigned to the Najd region in the depths of the barren Arabian interior, where they subsisted largely by raiding wealthier groups, such as those on the edge of the Hejaz. The Saudis cherished a stalkery relationship with the Hashemites, jealous of their wealth. The second tribe was Muhammad ibn Abd al-Wahhab, a throwback theologian who advocated a strict interpretation of Islam as it existed in the 7th century social and technological progress in the intervening millennium, be damned. It was a perfect match. The Saudis wanted the power of this world. Al-Wahhab's tribe sought a religious reset to access the next. The jealous Saudis wanted to wallow in all that sinful wealth themselves and resented the Ottomans protecting the Hashemites. The hyper-violent, raid-happy, camel-riding, fanatic Wahhabis saw the Hashemites as sinners and the Ottomans as usurpers of the holy cities. To seal their alliance, the two families agreed to a truly epic series of intermarriages. All they needed was someone to give them some modern weapons, tactical intelligence, and a bit of logistical support to move against their common foes. As luck would have it, someone dripping with such weapons, intelligence, and support was sniffing around for just such a goon squad. By the early 1900s, the entire Middle East was primed for conflict. Ottoman power had already failed in North Africa and the Balkans, and the restiveness of Arabia was matched by Russian agitation throughout the perennially agitated Caucasus. One big war later, the Ottoman Empire was on history's ash heap. The British left Arabia as quickly as they had arrived, but not before dismissively anointing their local allies the commanders of some of, even by Arabian standards, the world's most useless territories. The tribal Saudis immediately rebranded themselves the ruling House of Saud, while their in-laws, the Wahhabis, gained control of the Muslim world's Vatican City. Modern Saudi Arabia emerged from the Ottoman Empire's wreckage in 1932, and 6 years later, some Americans poking around in the new kingdom of Saudi Arabia discovered oil. The result was a country that hasn't exactly restored anyone's faith in humanity. The state of Saudi Arabia is first and foremost a medieval-style monarchy, a tyrant king, multi-wife, family murdering, crush the peasants, rich get richer, poor get poorer, off with her head monarchy. Power is concentrated wholly within the ruling family. Political dissent is routinely punished by torture and execution. Modern Saudi Arabia is quite literally the marriage of the Saudis' Comanche-style raiding history to the Wahhabis' Seventh-day Adventist come Amish worldview on issues of technology, topped off with both tribes' mafia-esque opinions about earthly punishment. Such political inflexibility and deliberately maintained economic inequality are unremittingly fused with one of the most repressive, sexist, and sadistic interpretations of any religion ever, with the repression of individual rights being a cornerstone of national identity. Such brutality is also the first pillar of the Saudi state. The result has been the establishment of some truly hateful norms. At home, the population lives under lockdown, despite some recent, glitzy, and completely insincere promises of economic and political reform. Any dissent is met with clubs and bullets. Dissenting members of the royal family itself are treated a bit better. They're held under house arrest at the Riyadh Four Seasons until they recant their views, repledge their loyalty to the crown, and sign over the bulk of their assets to the state. That is, of course, assuming they're not taken out for a one-way August picnic in the desert. Saudi cruelty isn't casual or incidental, but instead starkly deliberate. Saudi Arabia's wretched geography drains its people of any hope for economic or political advancement. With social stability a fragile thing, the last thing the ruling family wants is a bunch of college graduates. Anyone with a technical degree would have no reason to remain in the country. Rather than go through the effort, expense, and risk of educating the Saudi population, Riyadh imports millions of guest workers as needed Americans and Europeans for highly skilled work, and South Asians, Filipinos, and Indonesians for mid-skilled and unskilled labor. The country's manufacturing base is minuscule outside of oil-related stuff, such as refining and petrochemicals. For an idea of just how distorted this makes the Saudi workforce, consider the following. The Hajj is a major boon for the Saudi economy. Religious tourism in general employs nearly 1 million people of the population and attracts 17 million visitors annually. In the United States, Disney World alone draws 55 million people per year, yet employs fewer than 70,000 people. Similarly, the Saudis are hesitant to build an actual functional army, giving a large, organized group of men competence with firearms in a state ruled by a family that's a cross between Game of Thrones and the Beverly Hillbillies would guarantee coups. Consequently, Saudi Arabia's military is quite a bit different from the norm. For actual military purposes, the Saudis maintain a foreign mercenary force that draws heavily from Pakistan for its air force, Egypt for its army, the United Kingdom for trainers, and the United States for equipment. This model has two problems. First, the foreigners are as hyper-competent as the Saudi rank and file below them are incompetent. The military has no skill depth. Second, it is unclear that the foreigners would fight for Saudi Arabia when the rubber hits the road. Pakistan, Egypt, and the United Kingdom have all taken sharp issue with recent Saudi policy toward Yemen, Qatar, Iraq, Syria, Egypt, and Iran, while the Americans are looking for excuses to burn their maps of the entire region.